Welcome back to another episode of Fuzzy Memories from the Road. I am Brandy Green, and with me as always is...
And I'm Dustin Pari, happy to be here. Welcome to Tasmania. Something like that.
So this episode, we traveled from Sydney all the way down to Tasmania. Now, Tasmania...
The worst flight ever, but go ahead.
Yeah, Tasmania is this little island off of New South Wales, and it's like the Tasman Sea. I've been through a lot of really terrible flights, but this one I really thought we were going to die.
It has some of the strongest winds at any airport. And I remember the guy coming over, the announcing, the captain, and instead of just giving you the weather report like they usually do where they're going to land, they're like, well, the gusts are usually very dangerous here. It's like, oh, good, I don't need to hear this. But he was just like, if we don't make it, on our first attempt, we'll have to try to circle around. But the winds are really high. We may not be able to get in. All the things you want to hear from your captain when you're trying to land.
And mind you, we were in like a puddle jumper, like this very small plane, and we were literally dropping like elevation. We were like going any which way you could basically take a plane, put it in a bag and shake it. That was us.
How'd you do that with your voice? It was fun. It kind of reminded me of, remember like they used to have at the mall, those virtual reality rides that you would sit in and be like you're on a roller coaster? That was the flight into Tasmania.
It really was terrible. It was kind of like the air version of our Rockland Island boat experience.
That's perfect. Yep, just getting thrown everywhere.
But when Tasmania is actually very pretty, like the cliffside and stuff. It does remind me actually a lot of Ireland in a way.
I can see that.
Yeah. And again, when we were in Australia, we were in the Southern Hemisphere's winter. So it was summer up here, and down there it was cold and rainy.
Yeah.
Like always.
And it's mostly talking to the people. It's kind of like a retirement community, or there was like a college there, but I think the college was on break, and I think that was it. Like nobody else really, it's not a very populated place.
No, so just kind of remember that like Tasmania reminded me of sort of the South, like Mississippi, Alabama.
You think so?
Yes, it was like they drove
what are you getting at, Green?
They drove the big trucks with the giant tires and the flags out the back, and they wore like, it was very kind of stereotypical for our version.
The southern part of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I don't see that really up here, so.
No, yeah. See, my roots are down south, so it seems like it makes sense to me. But like, I like monster truck rallies and beer, so it all comes together.
Well, if you are in Australia and you like NASCAR and beer, then go to Tasmania.
Tasmania, good people there. You'll like it.
So I just remember we stayed at it was like the Fox Hound Inn.
Yeah.
And you found a special friend in your shoe one day. So
my father was a truck driver, and he used to go across country. And when I started telling him, about the travels and stuff I was going to be doing with the show, he shared with me some tips for being on the road. He's like, when I was in the desert, I'd always take my shoes, and in the morning I'd bang them and like dump them out before I put them on, because sometimes you get like bugs and scorpions and stuff that would go in the shoes. And so anywhere I went, I always thought, well, this was, some knowledge my father has passed on. I should keep this in mind. And it never seemed to give me anything except for one day at the Fox Hound Inn. down in Tasmania when, sure enough, out falls a scorpion and starts running around. So I took my sneaker and smashed it dead. And then I took it and I picked it up and put it on Brandy Green's front doorstep because I'm a good friend. But it was dead. It couldn't hurt you. I just wanted you to see it.
Thanks,
Like
brother.
like a stray cat that like brings you like dead field mice and birds. I'm earning my keep, Green.
No, I definitely, and it was one of those small ones too.
Yeah, those are
Really
poisonous
small.
little things. Those are
Yeah.
awful. But to think like that was in the room when you're sleeping. Like, it could have went in your mouth. It could have went like in your butt. It could have went anywhere. It was awful. The things we did for this show and no one cared.
No one ever knew.
No, the struggles were real.
I'm telling you, it's that footage. If that had made the episode, people would have loved us.
Yeah, here's some random stuff of insects and death and nonsense and flights and all things.
So, Tasmania, we went specifically to this area called Port Arthur, and it is along the coast section of Tasmania. And they have this huge ruined site of an old penitentiary that they do historical tours. I think they do ghost tours there too. But it's honestly, I think it's one of the largest, most expansive investigations I think we've ever done.
Yeah, this was another place that had a lot of buildings and they were really sparsely spread out on the property. So again, it was, we can't really do a big DVR run here. There's going to be a lot of like handy cam stuff. But what an amazing place to check out. I mean, the history of it was good. The types of activity they reported were good, and the case ended up being really good. But it started out, it was Timberland and Magoo. What was the thing?
I think it used to be a timber station originally.
There you go.
Because when they were clearing out, so again, Australia as a whole, it didn't become a colony until the turn of the 1800s. So, you know, it was relatively new. And I think that for Tasmania, I feel like that was probably populated after the mainland had been. So they were just trying to clear the area of brush and all of that. And so they had a timber station, and that's where some of the original buildings basically were constructed. And then eventually, by, I want to say like the mid 1800s, that's when it had actually turned into a prison, like a penal colony, basically.
Yeah, that's what it was, and they were very industrious. They had a shipbuilding area there. I remember they made shoes, which seemed odd, like cobbling elves, but they were inmates.
Andy
like,
Andrews would have loved this location.
He would have been there. It would have been great. But yeah, so it was a very industrious area. But again, this was the worst of the worst prisoners. You know, this was the UK sent their prisoners to Australia. Australia took the worst of those prisoners and sent them here to Port Arthur Penitentiary.
Right, and what I think what I really loved about this was that we actually had some tie-ins to previous investigations that we had done, and I believe to a future investigation also in Tasmania, that there were tie-ins because Wicklow Gaol in County Wicklow, Ireland, they had sent some of their prisoners here. Right. But then some of the prisoners prior to arriving to Port Arthur were tried at a courthouse that we investigated later on in our journey in Australia. So it's always kind of nice when you have that tie-in, because sometimes you can thread storylines through, and maybe you're looking potentially for the same spirit that might, who knows, be able to travel through different locations.
Right, and just even using familiar names, like if there's somebody there that was in Wicklow, being able to mention that could maybe spark their interest a little bit, because right. Who the heck has brought that up in the last 100 years?
Right. And also when you're investigating those locations, let's say a certain individual has a specific interaction or experience at one location, you can bring that person into this other location and say, hey, guess what? Here's a familiar face.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. It was cool. I liked the case itself. I remember my favorite part was the cathedral that they had there. It had like no roof because it was kind of in ruins, but it was at the end of like the Parsons Walk that went up to like where the Parsons lived and such. And it was really a cool place. And then they had the Isle of the Dead. I remember was another thing. I don't remember getting to go out there though. I don't.
Okay, so I remember there was a discussion that we were actually going to, whoever wanted to volunteer to go out there, they were going to take whoever wanted to go out there to investigate. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just time constraints or what, because remember, this place was very expansive, so it took longer to investigate because you had that on foot travel time walking from place to place. So I don't know if that was the reason that we never made it out there or what it was.
I remember I had some photos just from the shore because you could see it, but this was a place where when prisoners died, they would bring them out there to bury them. And because it wasn't used for so long, the stories were that, you know, the guards would go out there with a prisoner or two to dig the hole and put the body in. Sometimes they would unearth other bodies, you know, just by accident. And the guards and the other prisoners started reporting hearing wailing sounds and seeing apparitions. So this became a place they didn't want to go anymore.
Yeah, and that reminds me too. I feel like this is one of the locations that actually has had almost 2 centuries worth of paranormal activity reported.
Yeah.
So the paranormal, you know, a lot of times you go in and you find out these stories didn't really start until like the 1950s or, you know, it's more recent.
Right.
But I feel like this place had a long history of even prisoners from 100 years ago reporting odd activity.
Yeah. And I remember actually, I want to say it was a couple of years after we investigated there was a shooting there.
So I remember this because I asked Dave Hobbs if I should include this in my case download or not. And so it was a couple of years prior to us actually going there that in town, I don't know if it was there in the actual penitentiary like area, because they had like gift shops and which is weird.
And
they
like
had
a coffee house or something.
A cafeteria or like a food area. And I don't know if it happened there or if it actually happened just outside of that, like in the town of Port Arthur. I can't remember, but there was. And I feel like it may have happened longer before we were there. But yeah, it was a mass shooting and it was like all over the news and it was bad.
Yeah. It was still too recent for us to touch on.
Right.
So I remember we were just skirting around that. I remember stories of apparitions going down the Parsons Walk toward the chapel, EVPs, that kind of thing. As far as doing the investigation, I remember it being difficult to communicate even via walkie because of how far apart we were. So there's a lot of scheduling, like stay here till this time, come here to that time, that kind of thing.
Right. I feel like too. I feel like you mentioned the chapel area, so I thought I'd throw this in there while we're kind of in that area. So the chapel was actually constructed by the prisoners themselves. And there was a story that one of the prisoners actually, while they were digging like the foundation or trenches around it or whatever it was, he used an axe or whatever he was using to bludgeon to death another prisoner. And so I think there was a potential like spirit of either the murderer or the guy who got bludgeoned that was seen like up in it was like up higher. It didn't exist anymore because it was in ruins, but like up in a window area.
Yeah. It was really cool though. I remember lighting the place up because we did a series of photographs kind of from afar, and you could see like the ultraviolet light that we had inside because we're doing full spectrum. I remember you could see like the ultraviolet light through the camera, like through the roof area of the church and everything. It looked really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's where Barry caught his picture too.
Yeah, and this was, again, we always tell people, rapid succession photos on a tripod. Barry ruined my day off in Tasmania because he dragged me to some camera store and he bought a camera specifically, he was looking for something with a very long exposure was what he was trying to do. The idea of spirits moving in different time than we do, and sure enough, in just one photo, what looked like someone walking full stride on that Parsons walk toward the chapel looked like the figure of a person. And I remember we went back there, I think, on the second night and tried to recreate it. We had like Joe Chin trying to walk by it, but there was always that blur behind them because of the time difference, you know, with the long exposure. So that was a really cool piece of evidence. I think it was one of my favorites from that time.
Yeah, it was really, I remember seeing that and going, huh. Like, you really, because you really try to process like what you're looking at,
Yeah,
and you're trying to put two and two together, and it just wouldn't have made sense because the person, whoever that was, would have had to have been standing there still
yeah,
the entire time.
right. And you would have seen them in another photograph coming in or out.
Right,
And it couldn't have been a bug or something closer to the lens looking like it was there because, again, you would have had a path, you would have had a trail.
right,
So it was really cool when you knew of all the nuance that had to go into place to make that what it was.
right. I don't really remember anything crazy happening on my part. I just remember investigating with Ashley and another investigator, and I think we were in like the old bishop or the house that the priest stayed in, the parsonage, whatever it was.
Yeah,
And we were hearing a lot of movement from the upstairs, and it's basically a museum now. So they have certain sections that are just totally shut off. Like you can't access, they're like locked. And I just remember hearing like footsteps. We were hearing the disembodied footsteps, and I don't remember actually being able to capture it on my audio, which I had on the steps themselves. So that was very frustrating.
yeah.
Because we all were hearing it, you know, and reacting at the same time. Um, and yeah, I don't know. And I remember I got some messages after this episode aired because I guess I was a little cranky.
I can't imagine. You?
I don't remember why, but so investigating in that section, and I think I was trying to get down the stairs because I had my full spectrum camera, and I think Ashley was like
Yeah.
just standing there and not moving, and I'm like, move, and they kept it in the edited episode. I'm like,
Oh,
really? You cut everything else out, but you leave
right.
that in?
Yeah. They wanted to show the rough side of Brandy Green. Don't mess with the
Australia
girl.
was exhausting.
That's it. When Brandy's down under, she's a different beast.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Our client, I remember our client looked just like Scarlett Johansson, like her sister. It could be her sister. It was really funny because I remember mentioning it to a couple people. I'm like, she looks just like Scarlett Johansson.
I feel like I would remember that. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, no, if like, I'll have to put like the picture of her or something up on here so you can see her. But yeah, like she could totally be her sister. That's kind of all I think we deemed it. I think we deemed it haunted. I'm not sure.
The photograph enough, I think, was pretty good.
Right. I don't remember. I feel like there was another morgue or something at this place, and I think like Paul Bradford. I don't know if it was this place or the other place, the quarantine station. Like he spent time down there doing like solo sessions. I think he got some EVPs or something too.
I think that was Q Station.
Yeah. So I think it was mainly the picture and like EVPs.
Yeah, probably. I remember the day off because I remember going to I was so excited because they're like, oh, we're going to an animal sanctuary to see Tasmanian devils. And of course, because I'm a child, all I know is the cartoon version. And I'm not expecting it quite to look like that. But if you've never seen an actual Tasmanian devil,
you're going to be let down when you do.
Yeah, it's like if a teddy bear mated with a gerbil or a hamster, and they looked really angry. You know, they're about like this big in size, like a loaf of bread, furry, and just lots of teeth, and just growling and snarling. That part ties into the cartoon.
Yeah, their faces were always torn up. They had like tumors and cysts on their faces because
Yeah,
they transmit this like cancerous growth
right.
stuff to each other when they like attack each other.
Yeah,
When we went, it was feeding time.
that's right.
Do you
That's right.
remember
The
hearing?
cement wall around them like a pit.
And I don't know if that ever made the episode or maybe on the DVD, maybe if there's like bonus footage, I don't know.
It was like a bucket of slop, like bones. And
Yes.
they would eat anything.
And I just remember listening to them, and they would fight each other
Yeah,
over the food. And when they would bite into the bone, it sounded like if you're like crunching on crushed ice.
yeah.
That's what it sounded like effortless.
They destroyed everything. And that was the problem with them. The reason they were endangered wasn't because anyone's hunting them or other animals are messing with them, but because they attack each other all the time and trying to eat, they were spreading this disease. And they were trying to, there were certain ones that had like some DNA mutation that was making it so that they were not susceptible to the disease. I remember they were trying to isolate that gene. So they had them there, but it was weird because like you said, it was feeding time. I remember they dumped the bucket over the wall, and the guy would walk like 12 more steps and dump another bucket, and they would all just run to the next pile. Like nobody would just be like, I'll just go here. This seems like a peaceful place to eat. It was like, no, let's fight for this. Like it's just their nature.
They're very violent,
Oh,
very.
God. But yeah, the jaw is so powerful, just crushing everything.
Right. I remember being able to walk around there and you could pet like kangaroos and they had like a ton of different wildlife there. They had these really cool um, birds that were also at the prison and they were very colorful. And they're, I think they call them green rosellas or something like that. And they're like yellow and red and blue and green, like different colors. I have some pictures of them. They're really
Yeah.
cool looking.
I think I have a picture of myself with like an owl or some weird looking bird of some sort.
Yeah, I know they had like
A bird
giant.
show? Did we watch a bird show while we were there?
I think they had one going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think so. And I remember the kangaroos because we mentioned before in a previous episode about how they're like roadkill everywhere. They would go out. The sanctuary would go out to where there was the report of a kangaroo hit by a vehicle and check for joeys and take them out of the pouch and bring them here. So a lot of the kangaroos that were here were either injured in the wild or were raised in captivity because their parents were killed.
Yeah.
So it was really good work that they were doing, and probably I don't know one of the better days off that we an outing that we filmed. But again, we don't have the DVDs, so we don't know what anybody actually get to see or not.
Yeah, I have none of that footage except for whatever I may have taken like on my own.
Yeah,
And I remember too, I don't know if it was the same day or if it was just enough because we were in Australia for a long time.
yeah,
And this was like a full on month plus.
yeah. I think
Like,
it was like 5 weeks down there.
yeah. Which was okay because I enjoyed Australia overall. But we also went out just kind of sightseeing. This was not filmed for any potential on camera outing. And we went to like the Tasman Arch and we walked around and saw like the cliff sides and
Yeah, right.
all of that. That was really cool.
Yeah, there was something Devil's Kitchen, I think was the name of one of
Devil's
them.
Kitchen.
Yeah,
I thought it was the Devil's Den, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. You're
yeah,
right.
Devil's
Devil.
Kitchen. Where
Yeah.
he burns everything, obviously. Not a good.
Yeah, so that was neat. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I really, I mean, besides the flight, which was just horrible. I remember being there and thinking, we have to do that again.
Leaving was better though. Leaving was better than flying into the
It was
bluff.
not, yeah.
Yeah,
That fly-in was absolutely horrible. They should have filmed us during that.
right. That thing has been crazy, indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Australia, Tasmania. Food was good, very familiar to home kind of stuff.
right.
Nothing too crazy. Didn't care for Vegemite. Tried that. No thanks. Yeah, good stuff.
I think one more thing that I think I remember about the investigation before we wrap this up. I remember there was, so again, these are hardened criminals that are the worst of the worst. And there was cell block C, I remember specifically, And that's where they kind of kept like the worst offenders. And they had this thing where
Wild.
they felt like for these individuals, they had to they got 23 hours in their cell that had no windows or anything. They had 1 hour outside. But when they were outside, the guards would wear face masks and they would sign so that these prisoners could never actually hear a human voice
Wow. I don't remember that, but that's
as,
awful.
as like punishment because they felt like silence and solitude would bring you closer to God. And they felt like for these criminals, like that was their last hope. But it
Wow.
was very like psychological, which made it worse.
Yeah, for sure. We need human contact. I mean, I like quiet as much as anybody else. We need some human interaction for sure.
Right, and so naturally we put Ashley, who was the youngest one of the bunch, in a cell with
Yeah.
this guy that they believe to be the prisoner. His name is John Gould. I have a picture of him, actually. And he was one of the
By your
prisoners
bedside? Why do you have a picture of him?
because I remember I had found, so we had our crafty was set up in their kitchen area,
Mhm.
or it was like a cafeteria, and they had like one of those big charts and maps kind of,
Oh yeah.
of like the location. And then they had like some of their most infamous criminals that stayed there. And I remember in the history of it, John Gould. So I tried to find his picture and I found his picture and so me, you and Ashley went in cell block C
All right.
to investigate John Gould.
I'm glad you
And
remember it. The name's vaguely familiar, but I don't remember this other stuff.
yeah, and so all three of us went in to the cell. Nothing happened. You came out and you're like, you guys stay in there because this guy was like a convicted rapist or something.
My
And so it
apologies.
made more sense. Well, it made more sense though for female, he
Yeah.
might react more to female. We were trigger objects, basically. Um, but nothing happened when I was in there with her, so I left her in there by herself, and she had some really strange experiences. And I just remember she did not want to go back in there. Like
Yeah.
she was literally like shaking. And then so we took a break. We went to Crafty, and I found his picture, and I said, "Hey, Ashley."
Come look at this. You're so thoughtful of others, Brandy. Nice. Oh,
Yeah, so I remember doing that. Yeah.
I remember the guy's name, but I didn't remember anything about Cell Block C or the sign language or that investigation sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't remember that part at
I just
all.
remember the sign language part because I felt like it was a very interesting torture device.
Yeah.
Honestly, I consider that a torture. We've been to castles where they like pull limbs apart and whatever,
Yeah.
but this place actually focused on the psychology of like how to break a human being.
It's awful.
So I don't know if I showed it. If I didn't,
Here it is. The moment you're waiting for.
ta-da.
Nice.
And I even have, look at this, my old handwritten notes.
Look at that.
Yeah, and they
Showing
were written on the back of Wikipedia pages.
This show could have been sponsored by Wikipedia.
Maybe we could have went to a few more places if it had been.
Dear Lord. Crazy stuff. But a good time. Good time in Tasmania and crazy journey, crazy flight, but good case.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after this, we head back to the mainland for, I think, what was our last investigation of Australia. And so that's going to be, that was the courthouse in Hobart.
Sweet. So next time we'll go there. Or
Maybe,
not.
if we remember it.
Yeah. In the meantime, check out Peacock and go on Peacock TV and check out all the old episodes of GHI so you can see some of the things that we remember and see the things that we don't remember, see the things that we thought we remembered.
And see me getting crabby with certain cast members.
That's right. The salty Brandy Green only in these episodes in Australia and Tasmania.
All right, guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya.